Hello everybody, and well, it's a rare response video to somebody else's video. I know, it's not such a rare occurrence these days. I kind of miss it. So we're going to do one today, and this is in response to Cat Blaque. I don't remember if I ever did a response to her. I think I was always waiting for the opportune moment, and now I have the opportune moment. Now, recently there's been a new app released, and the name of this app is called LegalFling, and this app is, well, the name is what it is. Basically, it creates a legally binding contract between you and a potential partner that shows to everybody that consent was given from both parties. Affirmative consent was given. And what is affirmative consent? Well, it's an enthusiastic yes, to give you the simplest definition of the term. Of course, it gets muddied because feminists introduced this term and it changes according to the wind. And we've even seen government start to implement this into law. And from what I can gather, a lot of cases, it's basically constantly getting consent in sex every 10 minutes or so. And that's according to some school children in California, if Matt Jarbo is to be correct on that. Yeah, nobody really does that, obviously, but yeah, so this is an interesting invention. It might or might not sort out the problem with false allegations, but Cat Blaque really doesn't like this. And now, for some reason, a feminist doesn't like the idea of contracts showing consent was made. You know, legal proof. But let's see what she has to say about this.
Consent can be a confusing concept for some people because we're often socialized to see sex and intimacy as a game where one party seduces the other and slowly coerces them into doing something they initially didn't want to do.
Kat, I think that's more the feminist line on consent, about slowly coercing people and seducing them. Yes, seducing happens, but you do know the other person kind of wants it as well, otherwise they wouldn't give consent, but whatever, that's nuance. Usually, in the case of humans, both sides want it, man or a man or a man, woman or a woman, trap and whatever, and basically, this is what it is. Both parties want it, but one party has to initiate it, and with straight couples, it's usually the man. That's been the case since time immemorial. It's usually the males that have to court the females in order to, you know, either have sex or get into a relationship. That's what happens. That's nature. It's not a case of being seduced. It's a case of, you know, initiating something. Or sometimes happens completely by accident. You might have had a lot to drink. Both parties would have had a lot to drink and they black out and they wake up together and didn't realise they had sex. That can happen. It's not just that case of, oh, somebody seduced another person, which is something that's been introduced by you lot, but whatever.
And that's part of the allure for some people. The blurred lines and the game of playing hard to get. To some people, that's what consent is. Wearing someone down to the point where they say yes.
And yeah, you're right, that's the pick-up artist mantra, and that goes into very murky ground. And let's be honest, that's not an ideal situation for me or for most people. But most people don't view it that way. So I don't know where you've got that from. I think you and the pickup artists kind of share something there. You might want to rethink some things, Kat.
But oftentimes, this is a one-sided game that only takes into account one person's feelings.
That's a pretty good point, I agree. Usually the females. Oh, don't you feel sorry for them being seduced? And how evil was the guy for doing that? Yeah, but I don't think you wanted to say that. I don't know if you meant to imply that, but that's what I got from it.
Recently, we've seen many celebrities being called out and losing their jobs for doing something that they initially thought was consensual that turned out not to be. This has made a lot of people paranoid about being accused of rape or assault, and thus we found a target audience for a new app called LegalFling.
And you find this to be an issue because? I don't know. You're going to tell me that in a bit. But yeah, these people, most of them, and I think you're the first feminist has actually said this, you know that most of these men, because it's mostly men who've been accused of this, thought they were having consensual acts, but actually weren't. Now, in some cases, this was a case of miscommunication. She didn't really want it, he thought she wanted it, and the deed was done. In other cases, and this is where it gets, for me, quite disturbing and I think quite nasty, she wanted it at the time, he wanted it at the time, but after the fact, after everything was done, she then withdraws consent, which is something that can't actually happen. You can't do that. Once you've given permission or consent to that act or any kind of act, you can't just then withdraw it after you've already done it. That's what a lot of these cases actually were. And you're right, that's actually quite a bad thing. That's quite a murky thing. That's quite a horrible thing to be put into. So we need to somehow sort this out. But apparently this LegalFling, which has its issues, don't get me wrong, is bad. Apparently consent is not contractual. Okay, well, let's see your reasons. Also, it's really good to see that you're acknowledging the fear of false allegations. Although, please, Kat, don't downplay it. She's gonna downplay it.
LegalFling is an app created to legally protect two people engaging in sexual activity. While the app isn't released yet, it touts that its main feature is creating a list of mutually agreed upon sexual acts that effectively creates a legally binding contract that can be later used in court. On the website, LegalFling says, sex should be fun and safe, but nowadays, a lot of things can go wrong. LegalFling creates a legally binding agreement, which means any offense is a breach of contract. By using the live contracts protocol, your private agreement is verifiable with the blockchain and enforceable with a single click.
Now, on paper, there's really nothing wrong with this. In fact, it makes a hell of a lot of sense. How do you prove that consent was given? One way to do that is a contract. Contracts have universally been used by a lot of business practices and all sorts of other different things to show that consent was given, to show that a thing was agreed upon. Because I'm not an expert in law and some digital law stuff apart from copyright. I'm not an expert in that, but I know certain things like fair use. How exactly is it legally binding? Because it sounds to me like a gentleman's agreement, a verbal agreement that you shake hands on. I don't understand how this app has been legally, accepted. How can a court of law accept something that's brand new and they basically are saying, yeah, because you did this thing on this app and it's in the blockchain, and which is a financial thing, so maybe that's what it is. It's on that thing, it's on a system, words have been agreed upon, it's in a system, a database, therefore it's legally binding. I don't know how that would work. But other than that, the idea sounds good in principle. It's an interesting idea. So what's the problem here?
In my opinion, there's a huge pessimistic subtext to this app that says, wow, things have gotten so bad that we have to do this.
Well, yeah, things have gotten this bad that we need contracts in order to prove that consent was given. Because I don't know if you've been following the news lately or in the last 10 years, but there's been a huge spate of false allegations. There's been a hell of a lot of public attacks against, usually men, with sexual assault allegations or rape allegations or misconduct allegations, most of which have never been proven, probably cannot be proven, because a lot of these women did not go to the police at the time that these things were said to have occurred. Now, these things could have happened or not have happened. You can prove that crimes were committed with DNA evidence using rape kits, which most of these women did not do because they did not go to the police. And for the man, he can't prove that consent was given because, well, it's just his word against hers. And this app is meant to solve that issue by creating a digital contract between two parties to prove that both gave consent. It is actually for both, because if he, on the rare chance that he falsely accuses the woman, she can say, no, I did not rape him because of this. This is a contract that we agreed to. But of course, you're a feminist. So you don't think everything is as bad as it actually is. You do not see the reality set before you. You usually have this stupid statistic where it's claimed that 8% or 2%, it's a random number that they spurt out every year, that says that some of these allegations are false and that a certain number are actually true, even though we don't actually know how many are false and how many are true, because most of them are unproven. You're either a feminist that says that the false allegation problem isn't that much of a big deal. You would be a feminist like, say, Based Mum, Christina Hoff Sommers, or a Camille Paglia, where it says that it is a huge problem. Or you'll have feminists who will say that it isn't a problem. Women don't lie about rape. And I think Kat Blaque is somebody who downplays it, and she's already doing it now. There is a reason why there is this gap in the market being exploited, because this is a huge issue, Kat, massive issue, and it's only going to get worse because of things like #MeToo, who are creating massive witch hunts against men on accusations alone. There is a huge cultural problem with being unable to give men due process. There is also a huge cultural problem in certain women finding it very easy to accuse men, whether rightfully or wrongfully, of rape. And even though nothing is taken to court, this man's reputation is ruined on the accusation alone, socially. And apparently that's okay when it really shouldn't be. If you have somebody who you think has committed a crime against you in such a bad way as rape, you go to the cops, not to the media, not to Twitter.
Which is ridiculous because the only real thing that's changed in the past 20 years is that people now have the ability to speak out against sexual violence on social media, it can go viral, and repercussions can be faced.
Kat, that's not the place to bring people to justice. The place, and the only place where people can be brought to justice, is the law, the police, the court system. That's where you take it. Yeah, social media can allow you to, boost your voice and talk about the issues, but it should not be used to accuse people. You should go through the legal channels. And I find it interesting that the observation that you make is that after the last 20 years, due to the foundation of the internet, that these people have found a voice in which to accuse these men, rather than the fact that more false allegations keep being exposed. Yeah.
This has always been an issue, and a consent contract wouldn't have really been used in any of these situations.
Well, no, because firstly, back in the day, I think there was actually more of an idea of what consent actually was, rather than now, because the feminists didn't muddy the waters as much with their insane propaganda. I think there was much more, I wouldn't want to call it traditional, but a more simplified way of looking at it, as well as the fact that, yeah, social media wasn't around to heighten this, but there was still the stigma of being accused of such crimes. That's always been there. The believing the woman more than the man, or just, not giving somebody a due process when they do deserve it, has always been there. And probably always will be, because that's how humans are. Yes, they didn't have contracts, but then that also caused an issue where it was basically one person's word against another, because we're forgetting 20 years ago, DNA evidence wasn't as good as it is now. There's another issue. And in fact, if we go even further back than that, barely only 50 years ago, it was barely a thing. You just couldn't do that. So again, it was based on somebody's word, unless there were some kind of other physical evidence, like say bruises or cuts, or maybe there was a witness, which is very rare because most rapes occur with no witnesses other than the two parties. So yeah, there's a reason why this kind of app exists.
LegalFling acknowledging that the terms of consent can change is great, but an app that generates a consent contract where the terms can be changed at any time is completely useless. The concept of a consent contract on its own completely misses the point of consent. In this context, consent is an agreement made between two people engaging in sexual activity. It can be verbal or non-verbal, and it's all about respecting the boundaries of the person you're having sex with.
It's kind of interesting that you say that, because most feminists ignore non-verbal consent and just say they have to say yes or they have to say no, rather than, in most cases, as most human beings actually communicate, is through non-verbal language. And apparently what's interesting is this misses the point of consent, even though contracts usually are proof of consent. That's what they're meant to be. This is the proof that we agreed to this certain deal or this certain thing that we have to do. That's the whole point of a contract. In some cases. This actually doesn't miss the point of consent at all. They don't miss the point. I think what they do miss the point on is that this can actually be lied about. You could actually lie. Even if the thing was agreed, you can actually lie to a person or a court of law and say, yeah, they forced me to do it, even if you willingly did it. That's, again, something that you can't prove unless there is a witness to the act. In which case that person would be a voyeur, but that's why in actual proper business, you have somebody who witnesses it and writes everything down. In this case, it's kind of let down by the fact that you won't have that if you're having sex with someone, unless it's a threesome or a gangbang. Then you've got loads of witnesses.
Consent can be revoked at any time and is ongoing.
Well, not any time. I think once you've actually done the act, it can't be revoked. You can revoke it during the act or before it even happens. Maybe you decide, you know what, I don't think I can go through with this. Like that's fair enough. But if it's already been done, if sex has already been done and you're lying in bed and then the next day you part ways and never meet each other again, you can't revoke the consent then because you've already given it and the deed is done. I think it's you that doesn't really have the whole consent thing figured out yet, but I don't know.
Consent to one thing isn't consent to another. For example, kissing isn't consent to sex, and having sex with someone today isn't consent to having sex with them tomorrow.
Or conversely, with the kissing thing, it can be a non-verbal cue that somebody wants more. But again, like you said, kissing doesn't mean that they want sex. And likewise, just because you have sex one time doesn't mean the person wants sex another. Fair enough, we're all in agreement here, so what's the issue? You don't really seem to get what the app's all about. I think the app is actually about setting that kind of boundary, to set the terms of how they're going to do it. So yeah, a woman or a man can say, after this, no more. And you have to be legally bound to that contract.
Consent should be the result of communication between you and your partner, especially when you're trying new things and you're pushing the boundaries. Let's say, for example, that you were really into the idea of elbow deep fisting. No judgment, your kink is your kink. You're curious about it and you've never tried it before. So, you and your partner have a conversation about it, and they lube up their fist, and before they manage to get 2 knuckles in, you realize that this isn't what you wanted at all. That while you love the idea of a hand wiggling inside of you, that you can only stretch so far. So you'll probably say no or stop, or you might even communicate non-verbally that you're uncomfortable. Despite your previous conversation, in that moment, you're attempting to revoke your consent.
Yeah, I get it. We're all in agreement that that is the right way to revoke consent. And again, you can write that in to the contract. That contract can say, if at any time one party feels uncomfortable and they say no, that's it, the sex is over. That's the whole point of the contract. You work this out. You know, why am I trying to explain this to you? It's pretty clear that even though you've read the thing, you don't understand it at all.
From there, your partner can choose whether or not to respect that. If you say no and they continue to do what you told them not to do, they're assaulting you, because they no longer have your consent.
Again, I agree with you. And the contract is meant to enforce those boundaries. You can take that contract to a court of law and have this person tried for rape. And you would have, in some ways, some kind of evidence to support you. And indeed, you could even have maybe physical evidence in there if you go early enough to the police.
My big issue with this app is that superficially it seems like you're being trusting and communicating your needs and mutually agreeing to consent. However, by the nature of an app that creates a supposedly legal contract that could be used in court against accusations of sexual violence, I don't think it's any of those things.
So basically what it boils down to, and forgive me and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me like you don't want due process here. It seems to me like you just want any and all accusations to be believed. Is that what you want? Because this is actually what it's about. It is meant to not only clear things up in regards to consent, but also, in case usually a man is falsely accused, he can show that he got consent and he gave consent, importantly, as well. Because let's not forget, men get raped too, and usually they're drugged or they're threatened with an object to do it. Or maybe there's some other way. Maybe she does rape him, and if he lays a finger on her, she'll scream. And usually when women scream, that they're going to be believed. People believe that he attacked her, when in fact it was the other way around. That could be used to prove that he did not give consent to something. Like, say if he said no to her during the intercourse, they'd say she wanted to anally fist him, and he was open to the idea, but as soon as she tried it, he didn't want it, and she kept doing it, then he can prove that she raped him or assaulted him, whatever that would be. That way, a court of law or the police can't actually dismiss him, because that's what a lot of them do. They dismiss male victims outright, because apparently it can't happen, and according to the Duluth model, only men can be the perpetrators. And even according to a lot of laws in the West, men can only be raped through penetration, not through made to penetrate. So yeah, again, that's the whole point of the thing, and you're missing the point completely. And for political reasons, it also seems you want this contract stuff to go, because you want all accusations to be believed.
Personally, I would not sleep with someone who I felt I couldn't trust, and this app seems unnecessarily paranoid to me.
You know what, that's a perfectly understandable point. A lot of people are very monogamous and do not like the idea of promiscuous sex and would rather go into a relationship and have sex with somebody that they trust. Whereas some people are more open to the idea of just having sex with anybody. And I think in this case, really, it's more for those people than necessarily long-term relationships, even though it can work for both. But it's not unnecessarily paranoid at all. Again, as I've mentioned before, in the media and as we've seen on the internet, there is an absolute epidemic of false allegations and allegations that have not been proven to be false or even true, left, right and centre, and it's very hard to gauge whether consent was given in these cases or not, or what consent even is, because it's been muddied. There's so many different opinions, and this legal app is trying to sort that out and try and give people and society some kind of brevity with all this. It's really that simple. It's not overly paranoid, it's realistic, and we've gotten to this point because of feminists, because of feminism, with their crazy ideas about consent and their propaganda when it comes to what makes rape rape, and their just complete dismissal of male victims of not only rape but also false allegations. How you have to always believe the accuser, even if those accusers are lying. So even after Jackie from UVA was exposed for falsely accusing that frat group of raping her, people still supported her, feminists still supported her, and started a hashtag called No Perfect Victim. She was a victim even though she was proven to have lied. This is the problem that you lot have created. This is for chickens coming home to roost. And now you're complaining. Why am I not surprised? To quote Randy Harper, a well-known feminist, you've made your bed, so go fuck in it.
Yes, false accusations do happen. But false accusations are not common enough for this app to feel necessary to the people who think it's a great idea.
Yes, they do. And again, I knew you would start downplaying the problem. Now, of course, we didn't have exact numbers on all of this, but the fact remains, constantly on social media and in the media at large, we have seen these rape allegations come up and then immediately be proven to be exposed as false. Constantly, every year, there's more and more of them, and it reached a fever pitch last year, and it's only continuing this year. More and more. And yet you sit there with your head in the sand saying, it's not that big of a deal, it's not that big of a deal, you're just being paranoid. Wake up and actually show some empathy for those men or women in the minority of cases. Seriously, wake up, do the research, it's all there.
On top of that, there's nothing remotely sexy about this app, and I can't imagine that the people who think it's a good idea have ever had sex or successfully executed foreplay.
You can say the exact same thing about you, Kat, and other feminists who go on about affirmative consent, having to say, is this okay? Do I still have to consent every 10 minutes? That's actually far less sexier than this. At the very least, you know you have consent for the whole thing, apart from maybe a few things. But again, it depends on how you write the contract. Yeah, it's not that sexy. It's gotten to the point now where sex is being ruined by this thing, but this is all down to people like you, not me.
I mean, think about it. You and a person you're into decide that you're going to have sex. You open up your phones, you click on LegalFling, and make a long list of the deplorable things that you're planning to do to each other. Then once you've both agreed to the list, you retire to the bedroom, where in the midst of sex, if you decide to add or take something off the list, you have to grab your phone and edit it every single time, just to ensure that the person you're with couldn't possibly accuse you of sexual assault.
Yeah, and the exact same problem arises when you have to ask them every 10 minutes in order to get consent, just to make sure you still have it. Even then, you don't necessarily have to do that. You can just, you know, set the terms and just do it by the terms. It's a phone app. It probably doesn't even take that long to type it all out anyway. It might take even less time. You're basically just stringing this problem out that it has to make it look worse than it actually is, while downplaying actual problems like false allegations. It's just, your priorities, it's just so telling.
Am I the only millennial who puts their phone away when they're having sex?
Am I the only millennial that has a pragmatic view of it?
It's hard for me to not see this app as something designed to be abused by people who want to be able to take advantage of people and have the legal upper hand.
How exactly can a legally binding contract like that be used to abuse people? I'm just wondering. Now, maybe, yeah, they can sign this contract and then they can do horrible things to this person and then claim they didn't do it because, look, I got consent in this thing, even if legally they couldn't do that in the contract. But because it wasn't written down, because maybe some foresight by the other party wasn't included in that, they can get away with it. Maybe that can happen. We don't know how that's going to happen. We don't know how big of a problem it's going to be because this thing is so new.
But here's the thing. When it comes to contracts, a judge can decide if the nature of a contract is inappropriate and subsequently throw it out. So you could potentially go through all of that work just to have your contract thrown out of court.
Yeah, it can happen, and it most likely will because of the Duluth model. But the idea is sound. It's a good idea. But you just think it's completely a bad idea because apparently consent is not contractual. Seriously, all this is her complaining about the problems that her movement has created and blaming it on other people. That's essentially what this is. And this is just the complete unself-awareness of feminists. They create problems, they then see these problems that they've created, but can't put two and two together and realise, oh shit, we've created this problem, but now we're going to complain about it, even though we did it, but we don't think we did it because we're unaware that we did it. Honestly, I see this all the time. They constantly do it, and it's very annoying.
To me, there's nothing more exciting than giving consent to a man who I trust. Someone that I know not only cares about me, but cares about my pleasure as well. In my opinion, this app is completely and utterly useless.
Well, you know, you want to downplay how bad false allegations are, and it's in your political interests to do so. That's why you want it to look useless, when actually it isn't. At least in theory, it isn't useless. We don't know how exactly it's all going to pan out. This is the future you wanted.
In my opinion, the people who design this app don't often sleep with people that they actually like. But I hope one day someone will give them a chance.
You know what, I find it ironic that these people constantly accuse anti-feminists of saying things like that. Yeah, they're the first people to attack a person's sex life, to accuse them of being virgins, while at the same time we'll complain about women being virgin shamed or men being virgin shamed. It's like, you're the ones who primarily do that. Like, that's an ad hominem, that's not even an argument. Stefan, please.
Not an argument.
Thank you.
So they can understand that despite what they're used to, you don't always have to use your phone to get off.
You know, why is it they have to be so smug and horrible about all this? But anyway, that bit was complete non-argument. And, you know, here's my take on it. I very much just reiterate what Matt Jarbo said in his video, Monday Matt. You know, it sounds good on paper, but in practice, how is this actually going to work? I mean, you know, it's one thing to create a contract, but people can lie about the contract itself. And I don't understand how exactly this is legally binding. I don't know how a judge can accept this as a legal document, or even a lawyer. Like, I don't know, someone can tell me in the comments how this works. I'm not sure in practice it can actually be pulled off. I have a feeling that something like this needs actual legal power behind it, because I just don't think the blockchain has that power. It seems to me, from what I've seen, because I don't really know what the blockchain is, it's a online finance thing. It's like I don't know, it's just an app for trading, I think. So how does that work? I don't know. But anyway, people, give me your thoughts down below. Like and share the video. Until next time, it's been your boy. I'll see you later.